Hi, I'm Rick Anthony, and welcome to the Someone You Should Know podcast, the podcast that focuses on musicians, authors, and interesting people. We like to say we're making a difference one artist at a time. So sit back, have a cold one, and get ready to meet someone you should know. Today's Someone You Should Know podcast guest is a bass player and music director to the stars. He has performed with, get this, over 50 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees. He's appeared in more than a dozen Broadway shows. He's a member of the Blues Hall of Fame. He's got a new book out and a podcast. We have a whole bunch to talk about. To our friend today, Ivan Bodley, a.k.a. Funkboy. Welcome to the show, man. I really appreciate that, bud.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to talk to you.
When I started going through the backstory as far as that goes, when I go and do my research and everything, I'm going, good Lord, this guy, a lot to unpack today. We'll talk about the 50 rock and rollers from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that you've been part of. But first, let's put your humble...
It's up to 52 now, Rick. 52. I got to tell you.
Oh, very good. Let's go back to your humble beginnings. What was the name of the very first band you were in?
That's a fine question. I have to think about it, too, because the first thing I ever did was a high school talent show when I was 17 years old. And I think I played in 3 bands that day because I was only one of 2 bass players in my entire high school, which is another pro tip. If you're looking to be a musician, be a bass player. Everybody needs one. You work all the time. So one of the bands was called the Senators. One of them was called the Scene. And I cannot remember the name of the third one. But I was, So awesome. 3 bands that won that day.
That's one thing I always love to ask musicians, their very first bands, because you get some really bizarre names.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We didn't have, I had a band in college called the Radical Shiite God Squad. That was the more interesting sort of named band. But that name didn't age well over the years, as it turned out.
No kidding. My daughter, who is a musician out of St. Louis now, her band is called Sisser, but I remember the early derivations of her bands was Sanitation. It was kind of like their take on garbage. And then she also had fromage, which was, cheese.
Sure.
Really good. Sure. Okay. Now you magna cum laude graduate of Berklee College of Music.
I'm a board certified bass player, my friend.
A BA in psychology from Tulane, where you were the music director at a college radio station, WTUL. Let's give a little shout out to WTUL.
TUL, my roots, my heritage, my people. Yeah, I was the music director for almost my entire time there, about 3.5 years. I was the MD. I started my freshman year, and I started out at Tulane majoring in biomedical engineering, ended up getting a psych degree, but the whole time I was really majoring in college radio because that was my sort of primary focus and activity, and that's what sort of parlayed me into the music business. That's how I got the job working for Epic Records.
And the thing is, give you an idea how smart this guy is. He did not pursue radio as a career.
It's not to say that I wouldn't have liked to, but I didn't. You go through the doors that are open. Right, basically. Exactly. And that's kind of like my aspiration out of school was immediately to go for the record companies. That's kind of where I had contacts in the business.
I just retired after 44 years in the business, and that's what this show is all about. It's my nicotine patch to keep me from going back on the radio.
Right. Understood. Believe me.
Now, I know listeners are chomping at the bit to find a list of these 52 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees that you've played with. Care to name a few? Go ahead.
I can't remember any of them. No, that's not true. Some of the ones I spent the most time with, a lot of them I've sort of met and played with one time because I'll be like in the house band on a multi-bill classic rock and roll show kind of thing. So some people will come on stage and I'll do a few songs with them. So they go on the resume, but they're not people that I have a long sort of association with. That said, I was music director for Sam Moore from Sam and Dave for 13 years, on the road. So I spent a lot of time with Sam. And a lot of the Rock and Roll Hall of Famers, that would come and sit in with Sam are sort of associated through him. So through Sam, we met Sting and Elvis Costello and Robert Plant and Dr. John, like Winona Judd. Like he has all these big time rock star friends, Bruce Springsteen, who are just like, fans of Sam and Dave from back in the 60s. Because he has his true first tenor voice, and he came before all of them. So they came at him with no ego whatsoever. So he was really interesting to be around.
And they had some great hits through the years, too.
Tremendous. I mean, everybody remembers I'm a Soul Man. That's sort of like, the standard. Hold on, I'm coming. You didn't have to shake it like you did, but I thank you. Mm-hmm. That was a big one. I spent a year on the road music directing for Martha Reeves and the Vandellas.
Oh, wonderful.
I spent I've been on and off for the last 30 years. I've been associated with Shirley Alston Reeves, original lead singer of the world famous Shirelles. So she was one of the first Rock and Roll Hall of Famers that I worked with, that I actually still continue to work with, although she seems to have retired via the pandemic and doesn't seem sad about it at all. She's like, been on the road since she's 16 years old. Wow. And she's 82 now. And she's like, no, I'm good. We're good. We did it. We're cool.
That's true. I've got enough royalty checks coming in to survive.
Yeah, she's fine. The house is paid for and she's good, Can't be mad at her.
It's music time now. We're going to feature some new music that we've got from Ivan here. And this is some really good stuff. Shake It, Don't Break It on Color Red Records. Can you give us the vibe behind this particular song?
Shake It, Don't Break It. So this is something that I recorded during the quarantine, during the lockdown. We're all stuck in our houses, and I have a bunch of musicians who I know are just dear, dear friends of mine who are set up to record at home. So we did those all via file sharing. Like I would put together a bass line and some chord changes and write a melody and then send out just like a click track with a bass line to my friend Kenny Soul on drums, who would send back a drum track. We'd send it to, I forget who else is on that track. Chris Macio from the Uptown Horns, maybe, Moses Moe from Mother's Finest. These are all people that we collaborated with over the quarantine. And it sounds like we're in the room together. It really does, because we actually have spent that much time playing together in the room, so that when we did the email file sharing, we know each other so well that the result is what you're about to hear now.
All right. Kenny's just a little straight. Kenny Soul from North Carolina?
Absolutely. From DAG, from Nantucket, from PKM. Exactly.
Oh my God. PKM, I was in Raleigh, and I loved PKM.
Tremendous band. Kenny's a great player, great guy, and a dear friend.
We said that I said, I have to stop. Kenny Soul. Yeah, I remember him. Yeah, Pee Wee and Mike.
Yeah,
PKM.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Love their music. All right, here's the song we were talking about. Shake It, Don't Break It from Funkboy, a.k.a. Ivan Bodley, on the Someone You Should Know podcast. Great music right there from today's guest, Ivan Bodley. He's known as Funkboy, and that is Shake It, Don't Break It on the Someone You Should Know podcast. We've talked about some of the people he played with that are now in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You were also part of 13 Broadway shows, including Rock of Ages, Spider-Man, Hedwig and the Angry Inch, also Kinky Boots, just to name a few. Now, it's obviously different playing in a musical versus playing on stage or playing in a studio, because you're actually below the stage in most cases, right? So
it's very different. It's a very different scene. However, some of the ones you just mentioned, Rock of Ages, the band was on stage. Hedwig with the band was on stage. So I've done them on and off stage, depending, in the pit and on stage, both.
But yeah, it's quite a different performance type thing as far as that goes.
It is. It's almost kind of like doing a live recording session every day. Like, you're sitting in the basement or underneath the stage. You got a pair of headphones on. You're looking at the conductor on a little video monitor, very similar to what I'm looking at you on right now. And they don't appreciate mistakes over there. They like it to be exactly perfect. They like it to be consistent night after night. And so, yeah, to me, it feels like doing a live recording.
Awesome. Very good. No embellishments then,
No. In fact, most of my time on Broadway, I've not had chairs on Broadway. I've been substitute player on Broadway. I've still played, 500 or 600 performances on Broadway, but I've never been the chair holder on Broadway. So what happens is when you come in and you're subbing for someone, they want you to sound like the person you're subbing for. They don't want you to bring your personality, because upstairs you have people who are acting, singing, and dancing. And if they hear something distracting, they go they're going to miss a step. They're going to turn an ankle. They're going to forget a line, they want it to be the same night after night after night.
Absolutely.
So the best compliment you can get on a Broadway show is in the hallway at intermission. If they see you and they go, "Oh, I didn't know you were on tonight." That's the best thing they can say to you.
Wonderful. Very good.
I had no idea it was you.
Very good. The next thing, since you have been on the road for many years, you've had your share of load-ins and load-outs. The next feature is called Tales from the Road. Those infamous road stories of getting to a gig, something that happened at a gig backstage, your hotel accommodations, something that happened in your vehicles getting to and from the gig. Anything come to mind, Ivan?
Just so many. I've been doing this for 30 years, and kind of that's what my book is about the road stories, the things that happen on the road. In terms of travel, this is not something that happened to me, but I witnessed it firsthand. We were playing with the great Solomon Burke, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, in Central Park in front of about 10,000 of our closest friends. And he brought, we had an 8-piece band with a 4-piece horn section, the mighty Uptown Horns, and Dr. Burke, we called him, brought 6 more horns. So we had a full 10 horns. It sounded almost like the USC marching band up there. So when we got to the gig, a van rolled up. Well, let me put it this way. The horns were from Los Angeles, California, which is where he lived at the time. Mm-hmm. So he called the guys. He said, "Listen, we've got a gig in New York. Meet me at LAX airport, and we're going to go to New York to play at Central Park." And they're like, "Great, we got a gig in New York." So they all showed up at LAX in the morning, and he said, "Thank you for coming, fellas. There's your van. I'm going to meet you in New York."
Oh, geez.
So when we got to the gig, because we're local in New York, so we just showed up at Central Park, no big deal. A van rolls up, and 6 very ragged, tired, put out looking horn players roll out of the van. Like, what's going on with you guys? Like, they just drove from Los Angeles to play this one gig in Central Park. And I was like, oof. And that was kind of like Dr. Burke. He was kind of infamous for, being very tight with a buck. He knew how to work, every end of his business to make sure he was going to maximize profits. And
wonderful. Well, that's a good story.
Witnessed it firsthand.
I appreciate that. Another song we're going to feature is called Crab Walk. What's the backstory on Crab Walk?
Crab Walk, again, this is another one that I did during the quarantine. I just have, I'll get a melodic hook in my brain, or sometimes it'll start with a piece of groove, just a bass line, and then I sort of flesh out, because I've had these writing project bands over the years, where you have to bring in a song every Tuesday, no matter what. Mm-hmm. So I would have these fragments, and I would just flesh these things out. And then again, we're all stuck at the house during this is probably in 2020 when this was done. And I called all my friends. I said, my friend Doug Hendricks, who was the great percussionist on In the Heights on Broadway over here, and he's like, "You want to record?" He's like, "Absolutely." Like, he's sitting home dying for stuff to do. Chris Macio from the Uptown Horns, he put like 4 or 5 saxophones on this track, and man, it was just a lot of fun. We put it together that way.
Great song too. We're going to feature that right now on the Someone You Should Know podcast. It's called Crab Walk. Crab walk right there from today's guest, Ivan Bodley, a.k.a. Funkboy. We mentioned briefly that you've got a book out called Am I Famous? The Memoir of a Working Class Rock Star. What's the story behind the book? And here's the thing. I'm doing the podcast because my wife told me I should write a book. And I said, I don't write books. So I'm doing this podcast to share and have a lot of fun with. What's the story behind your book?
Well, it's a very similar story to what you just said. Like, people kept telling me, you should write a book, because I always have stories. Every time we're on a gig, backstage, at dinner, between sound check and the show, if something untoward has happened during the day, travel, logistics, whatever, it always puts me in mind of something else that happened that was crazier on another gig. And I would tell these stories like around the dinner table, and people were constantly saying, you should write these down. You should write a book. I started to do it about 4 or 5 years ago, just kind of started collecting some ideas and got it together to a point, but really didn't finish the thing. And then, like I've mentioned a couple of times, suddenly as a live performing artist, when there are no live performing venues available during a global shutdown, you're like, all right, now I got time to finish the book. So I really finished the book. My aunt is a copy editor over at Time Magazine. I said, can you help me just make sure all the commas are right and the grammar is correct? She said, absolutely. So we got this book finished. We got it self-published via Amazon. And it's a collection of 30 years of
wonderful
road stories and shenanigans and show business insiders and 52 Rock and Roll Hall of Famers and everything else.
Wonderful. We'll include links down in the description and in the show notes here for you to get a chance to purchase that. I know I got to pick up a copy myself here. Let's talk next about the fact that you have a prestigious honor being a member of the Blues Hall of Fame. Can you tell us your thoughts on that?
It's a beautiful bowling trophy that I got on the wall over here. And it's one of those things, sort of like, because I got it about maybe 10 years ago, and I'm thinking like, whoa, I'm not nearly old enough to be in a hall of anything, like I'm still working. I'm still out here doing it. But the New York Blues Society has been very generous about recognizing people that are hard at work in the trenches and have been playing with blues artists, in New York City again for 30 years now. So they voted me in, and I got a plaque to prove it. And what can I say? I'm humbled and I'm honored, and I'm glad to be still doing what I'm doing.
Oh, that's wonderful. But once again, the name of the book is "Am I Famous?" The memoir of a working class rock star, which is also the name of your podcast. Can you tell us about the podcast?
Podcast started out kind of almost as the audiobook version. Like, I just read all the chapters in front of the camera, and because people consume media in different ways now. People have some people are YouTube only, some people are audio only, some people are video only. Just depends. Some people read only on Kindle, some people read only hard copies of books, physical books. So I kind of put the book out in every different format. So, it's available on YouTube. It's available as a podcast. It's available in hardcover and softcover and Kindle edition. Like, however you consume media, there's a version of it for you. And then the podcast continued on a little bit with, additional road stories, interviews, people that, sort of continuing on. I've kind of put it down for a minute, in terms of new episodes, because I've started working again. I'm really been really busy. So, there'll be some updates posted soon, but, again, whatever format you care to address this material, it's available for you. In
wonderful.
Format.
We'll include a couple down there in the show notes to make sure that everyone can follow what you're doing. Now, I know you're with Humble Pie. They are currently working on a 2023 tour. I am going to provide an update in a couple of weeks on how that's going and such. So, what can you tell us about working with Humble Pie?
It is the legacy of one of the greatest hard rock acts of all time, and I'm just thrilled to pieces to be a part of it. The great Jerry Shirley, who is a founding member of Humble Pie, the original drummer, he's put together a new band of people to play the music of Humble Pie, which hasn't been seen in public for over 20 years. We're just days away from a major press announcement about what's going to be happening. So I can't tell all the secrets just yet, but suffice to say that, watch this space. Things are coming. And
very good. You're going to have to give me an update on that. Just shoot me an email. Let me know, and I'll go ahead and do a show update as far as 100%.
I'll do that. Okay. Absolutely.
Now, when I prepare for my for interviews, I always go through a whole bunch of notes, and Ivan had a whole bunch. There's one I have to include just because it looked funny. Best snack cakes on the market.
Yeah, absolutely right. Ivan Bodley eats only Little Debbie snack cakes. It's part of my bio. Now, to be fair, the McKee Baking Company, who manufactures Little Debbie's, has no idea that I exist, and they've not sanctioned me officially. But
I was going to say you should have it, on your amp or something like that. Or,
well, I kind of here's the thing, sort of in the music world, especially when you go to musicians' websites, they say, so and so plays only this kind of guitar and this kind of string and this kind of amp. And I'm in that market, I'm in that game to a point, but also I recognize that it's kind of silly in a way too. So, so I have on my website that I play only Hartke amplifiers. I use Fender basses. I use Gretsch basses. I use DR handmade strings. I use Tech 21, Sansamp, signal processors. And I only eat Little Debbie snack cakes because, wanted people to understand that, I'm in it, but I'm also kind of winking at it at the same time.
Yeah, there you go. Here's the thing. Years and years ago, I used to have a show called Back in the Pits, and I would interview drag racers and such. And of course, they get their sponsors in. So it was just like, for a moment there was like, I'd like to thank Prestone, and I'd like to thank Skoll. I also want to thank Quaker State.
Absolutely, because I definitely have those companies that support me, and I do use their products, and I love it. But also, come on. It's a commercial enterprise, and we all understand that. Okay. So that's my way of letting people know, like, yeah, I see what's happening, you see what's happening, and let's be on the same page about this.
This guy is all over the web, too, because he's got the podcast and everything. How about some links? What's the first link you go to?
Funkboy.net. It'll tell you everything, and it links to everything as well. So, like, Funkboy.net will take you to the book. It'll take you to the podcast. It'll take you to my photo gallery of my rogues gallery of photos, which is unconscionably long. But it's just sort of like I've been collecting photos since I was a publicist, even since I was back at WTUL radio, when people come down for an interview and get a snapshot. And then, it's an impressive collection of photos, even to me, because they're people that I met for like 1/500th of a second, the length of a camera shutter, in addition to people that I did work with for years and years. But it's a fascinating, it's a fascinating collection of oddities. I'll put it that way.
Awesome. Very good. Any closing thoughts you'd like to impart with us before we close up shop today?
I'm just so happy that you having me on the show and that you're exposing me to your kind listeners. And I enjoy what I do very much, or I wouldn't keep doing it, because a lot of the road stories are about things which sound like fairly negative things. Like, why would you keep doing this if you keep having these negative experiences?
But Spinal Tap moments, yeah.
100%. Spinal Tap is the movie that I quote almost every day. I live my life by it. I live inside that film every day, and I enjoy it. I love it. I obviously love it.
Have you ever got on stage and said the wrong city or,
Oh, I've said the wrong bride's name at weddings. I've said the wrong city. Believe me, anything you can possibly do wrong on stage, done it, been there, done it, had it happen in front of 1,000 people.
Book. It's probably in the book too. So
a lot of it is. Yeah. A lot of it is.
All right. We're going to close with Friday Night Groove by Funkboy. Do me a favor and tell us the backstory on this one.
Friday Night Groove. Okay, so this one goes back to the writing and recording project I was telling you about. This is going back about a dozen years. So my friend Jim Dower and my friend Joe Goretti, we were all people knocking around New York, and in the wintertime, our work would get slow. Like, we work more in spring, summer, all the summer concerts and whatnot. So we're looking around, sitting around, like, what can we do? So we started a writing and recording band, the three of us, a trio, like a little power trio, to do these sort of jazz fusion kind of things. And every other Tuesday, we'd meet at Joe's house. He was working on recording and miking and all these techniques, and Jim and I were working on our writing, composing techniques. We'd bring in a song, we'd pass out the piece of paper, we would rehearse it once, we'd record it once, go get a sandwich, and come back and do the other guy's song. And we did this for, 4 years or so. And Friday night was one of those grooves that I came in and I passed out to the boys. This is the first take of this song. We've only ever played it one time only, and it just came out so well. I said, no, we're going to release this, and Color Red was kind enough to put it out for us.
It's really strange, but you go through so many artists nowadays. The bass comes in one day, the drums come in the next day or something like that. That's right. It's all mixed that way. I love the good old times when you had just 4 mics or maybe a dozen mics or something like that, but 4 players playing at the same time.
This is exactly what this is. It's the 3 of us looking at each other, like raising eyebrows to cue the bridge section and looking at a piece of paper, and this is 100% live.
Wonderful. Once again, my guest today is Ivan Bodley, Funkboy. Make sure you check out the show notes to find out all the information. Check out his podcast. There'll be a link in the show notes. Also his book. And it's been a real treat to have you on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Very, very enjoyable.
Hi, this is Rick Anthony, thanking you again for listening to this episode of Someone You Should Know. Now, if you're an aspiring musician or an established musician that's looking for a little exposure, I invite you to drop us a line at someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. That's someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. Also, I invite you to tell a friend about the Someone You Should Know podcast. I thank you for tuning in this time, and I invite you to check us out next time on the Someone You Should Know podcast, because you never know who's going to show up. Until next time, remember, God loves you, and so do I.